highlighted this quote in here I really liked. He says, "Don't be a victim of the urgent. In the long run, much of what seems so pressing right now won't even matter. What you do with your children will matter forever." Welcome back, friends, to Eat, Read, Sleep with Kalina
and Tapas.
And this is our drinks and discussion segment of Eat, Read, Sleep. This week we are going over the book, The 5 Love Languages of Children. So I think it is very fitting that today we are drinking boxed juice.
Yes.
Juice boxes.
Not sponsored by Honest, but
no.
Jessica Alba, if you're watching this, we would love to.
Yeah. All right. So let's actually toast first.
Yes.
Cheers. Actually, before I open this, I want to ask you a question. How do you open a juice box for Thea?
Like normal people, just throw the straw on the top and then give it to them, right?
So, like unnormal people then. let me share with you guys. This is a mom hack that I learned. Have you seen these little tabs on the ears here?
Yes.
You actually can pull them out. Okay. So I have this problem a lot with my kids. When I give them a juice box and I pop the straw into it and I give it to them, you know what happens? They grab it with their little grubby hands and then it just spills everywhere because the bottle is filled to the top. I don't know why they fill these things so full. But if you pop the little ears off and hand them to your kids, they can actually grab it and drink. And they won't ever spill anything. And I give it to Gemma like this, and it's the cutest thing. She's just walking around with her juice box like this. So
looks
proper.
so proper.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Put your finger like.
It's the pinky way for little toddlers to drink their juice.
That's awesome.
Yes. All right. So toast to you guys. Hopefully you got a little juice box with you at home too, so you can drink with us. But anyway, so we're doing 5 love languages of children. So this is a play off of the 5 love languages of adults, I guess. The Secret to Love That Lasts. And this is a book that's been around for a very long time. This is catered mostly to marriages and relationships. And it's been so effective and so popular in the past, many, many years that the author was actually approached to write one specifically for children as well. And what I think is very unique about this children's book is that Gary Chapman actually partnered up with Ross Campbell, who is I believe he's a medicine psychologist that specializes in emotional needs of young children. And so with both of their minds put together, they created this. And so as you're going through, the content is very sound and structured with a lot of research that backs it up. So it's a good read.
Yeah, I didn't read the first one, the 5 love languages, but I feel like after reading the second one, which is with kids, I think they're all very universal, very similar.
Very similar,
right?
yes.
So you don't have to necessarily have children to kind of get benefit from the book, right?
That is a great point. So as we're talking through this, I know it's for children. This is not just for parents, right? This book and the content in here is for parents, for teachers, or anyone that works with kids, around kids, have children in their lives. But then just like Tapas said, the content is very applicable to all relationships, so to marriages, to even colleagues, coworkers, and it gives you a really good understanding of how and why people are the way they are, and then how you can better respond to them to help flourish your relationship as well. So I thought that was it's a good turn for us because we've been focusing more on the motivational leadership type books. So I was really excited to pick this up because if you guys don't know, both Tapas and I have kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at home, and Thea is 6, right? Yep. So this is very applicable to us. So it was very fun to read. Looking forward to sharing it with you guys today. Okay, so wanted to share real quick. This book was introduced to me actually a couple of years ago, and not necessarily introduced. I follow this influencer on Instagram. Her name is Laura Is. If you guys don't follow her, I highly recommend it. She's got great posts about her kids and her family, and it's a very warming follow to follow her life. And she mentioned that she had read this book a couple of years ago, and how it's helped her create this understanding and bond with her children. And so I read this for the first time many years ago, and then I picked the book back up again recently for this segment of ours. And it just really ties in together everything that we've been doing, right? Like everything that we've been learning, all the nonfiction stuff was really a lot for us, and then how we can kind of help the world around us or people around us. But then this really brings it down to like the little people around us. Like how do we tie it all together and bring it full circle with our future generations.
Yeah, I think a big part of our
We'll just keep
our
this down.
recent our recent journey has been around, and obviously self development, self care. But one thing that I myself have been really focusing on is becoming a better parent. So I think this book kind of came at the perfect time because you mentioned, I'm like, actually, that actually might be a really good book to review and read, because I would like to have a better connection with my daughter. And I knew of the five languages, but I always just said, well, my daughter does all of them. But I was like,
Yeah.
hey, she wants all of them. But this book really kind of helped me kind of identify which specific ones that she expresses.
Hmm.
And also, he mentioned in the book is that people will also express their love one way, and also it might be different from how they want to receive love as well, which was kind of something
Absolutely.
I
That's the
kind of
great.
didn't know about.
Yes, that's a great point. You brought that up. I actually did a seminar for my old team a couple of years ago on the five love languages for colleagues, for coworkers. And it was very interesting because it allowed us to see exactly what you said, our dynamic and how we work together, but not just how we are, how we treat other people, but how we want to be treated. It's completely different.
Yes.
It's very weird. Your main love language isn't necessarily how you display.
Right.
Yeah, so
Right.
I learned that as well. You mentioned the five love languages, and so for people who don't know or are familiar with the five love languages, this is universal from Gary Chapman. So the five love languages are number one, physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, and acts of services. And the foundation of everything that we do, Campbell says, is love, and there's different ways to speak love, and these are the five ways that you can do it.
And so he begins the book with the emotional tank, right?
The emotional love tank. Had you
Yeah.
heard of that before this?
No, that's the first time I ever heard about that. Honestly.
So the emotional love tank is like your emotional strength, right? Think
Mm-hmm.
of it like a gas tank in a car. If it's full, then you've got range. You can go and you've got all this power, but if you're running on low or empty and you've got no gas, you're going to break down, right? So very similar concept. It's also measures essentially kind of, we've been hearing it more in recent years, the term emotional IQ, your emotional intelligence, how well you can comprehend feelings and have that empathy from other people as well.
The emotional IQ has kind of come to the forefront recently. I've seen a lot of companies also take that into consideration
Yes.
too, in terms of how their teams are engaged around it. And of course, for everyday individuals, it's also very, very important to make sure that you are emotionally healthy. That's what will get you through
Yeah.
your day too.
Yeah. Gary Chapman says that the more emotionally invested you are into your children, the more they can grow up to be more well rounded and be able to handle the emotions that come at them. So, anxiety, stress, all of that, they'll be able to better navigate through it because it's going to happen. But this teaches us the foundation to be stronger people, essentially.
So let me ask you, what do we fill this emotional tank with?
With premium,
Yes.
unconditional love.
Yep. Which this was something that this beginning of the book, right? I was like, wow, I had never thought about it, where he says there is no such thing as too much unconditional love.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that in the past too, because I always kind of felt like I gave a lot of unconditional love to my daughter, and a lot of people will judge that as spoiling. You're spoiling your kid too much. But vice versa, which is if you're doing conditional love, meaning you're basing your love, or they're thinking you're basing their love on performance or things that they do to accomplish to get your love, then that in itself is I mean, when you think about it, that aspect, it's obviously going to have a detriment to the kids.
Yeah, it's not the
well-being.
type of love that we should be giving our children.
Right.
Can we go back to that real quick? Conditional love.
Yes.
I think a lot, if not almost everyone, gives conditional love.
Yes.
And we do it unintentionally. We don't know it, right? But it's in the things of like, hey, if you behave, if you do this, if you get straight A's in school, if you're a good boy, if you're a good girl, like you give these expectations and you want your child to be obedient and grow up or behave in a certain way. That is conditional love.
Yes.
Unconditional love is loving your children for who they are, their entire being, all of their mistakes, all of their failures, all of the ways that they are not what you have in your mind, and still loving them and showing them love regardless.
So powerful that concept when a parent can tell their child, like, even if they screw up, if they don't do well in school, if they get a bad grade, whatever it is, I still love you. I don't care what happened.
Yeah.
This reminded me of a story. Sorry, I'm going to sidetrack this, but this just came in my head where Kobe Bryant was saying he was in high school and he had gone through summer camp and he scored 0 points the entire summer camp. And this is Kobe Bryant we're talking about, right? One of the greatest basketball players ever played. But he scored 0 points. And he was so defeated, so upset with himself. And this is for 2 months. He didn't score a single point in any game. And he was so sad and so upset. But at the end of camp, his dad came up to him and said, I don't care how many you scored. I still love you so much. I'm so proud of you, right? Kobe says that to that day, that was what fueled him and saying that, Dad, that's never going to happen again. But he had that confidence. Like, you know what? Even though I screwed up, even though I didn't score a point, my dad and mom love me. That was so, like, that's what motivated him to just become this amazing athlete.
Yeah.
So I think about it because, that was an amazing story. And I always kind of tell my daughter too, like, even if she doesn't do well, I still love you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that you didn't do well.
I love that you mentioned that story because he says, I love you no matter what. And it ends there.
Yes.
Okay. Because what happens as parents, what we think the next best thing to say is, next time we'll get them.
Yes.
Next time we'll be better. Let's go home and practice and be better. And what you're essentially doing is you're saying, great, but.
Yes.
And then it's that but that gets your children to start thinking, am I enough? Am I worthy enough? Am I valuable enough? And that's when all of those insecurities start to build up, and then it translates to adulthood, and you see it in adults. Like, they're living, walking creatures of this anxiety that's been built, of this unworthiness that's been built from childhood, unintentionally from the parents, right?
Exactly.
So thank you for bringing that story up, because it gave me chills as you were saying that, right?
Yeah.
You don't see it. Well, I don't want to, be create a blank statement like that, but at least for me, I don't see it very often. I do see a lot of conditional love where the parents give conditions, whether they know it or not, but they have these parameters, they have these expectations, but it's unintentional.
It is, yeah. It's very intentional. And then you're right. I think not a lot of parents have that mindset, but they just know that maybe that's the best.
What's best for our
kids,
right?
And a lot of adults have realized that if they themselves have good behavior and they do well at work and they have this performance, they'll get rewarded with something. So they kind of assume that that's how the kids will want it too.
Yeah.
Versus the kids just want to be loved.
Yeah.
So
I think for me, the most important thing is realizing that I don't necessarily know what's best also.
Yeah.
So I can hope and guide my children in that direction. But if it's not the way that I imagine in my mind, it should be okay as well. We're only here to support our children and help them feel confident and happy in who they are as a being. And beyond that is really out of our control. And
right. And as Jay Shetty said, we don't own our children.
Yes.
We're only here to just help guide them to become better.
They are
adults.
not ours to control.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest thing. And I love that about this book is it's not about controlling your children.
Yes.
It's guiding and helping be the support so your children can control their own lives. Before we go into the 5 love languages, we'll break them all down because it's very important. Chapman tells us for children, especially for young children, you have to give them all five love languages, even up until age 18. From the moment they're born until they're 18, we need to give them all 5 love languages. However, every child has a primary love language, and we'll teach you at the end of this how to identify your child's primary love language, and then you can supplement that with all of the others. And then once you know that, you'll start thinking as you look at the other relationships in your life, and you'll be able to apply that a little bit better as well. Before we go into it, there are a couple of caveats or things I want to start off with. He tells us things that we need to remember as a parent as we go into this and we start, quote, quote, working with our children through understanding their language. We have to remember that at the end of the day, they are children. And by definition, children are childish, right? And we have to be okay with that. I think a lot of times parents expect their kids to be obedient. They expect them to be quiet. They expect them to fall in line and do what they're supposed to do. But they're kids. They're doing what they're supposed to do. And their childish behavior is unpleasant because we are adults. It's not unpleasant in itself. It's because we as adults don't know how to have fun. Right. Don't know how to look at something and take lightly about it, right? We've had the fun suck out of us because we now work, we have responsibilities, we've got bills, we've got like 10 million things that we think about before our head even hits the pillow at night, that there is no room for fun. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing here for us to remember as we go into this, to look at our children as children and not expect anything else from them. Who they are is.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and this came up where, he said, children especially, are always experimenting, right? So I know a lot of parents get upset when kids make a mess or not, all that kind of stuff, and it's unpleasant, right? Like you said. But he said, kids are always experimenting. You want them to experiment in their environment. Like they want to feel comfortable doing it. So he said the next time, you're going down, let's say it's a rainy day, you're walking the kid across the street to go to school and to see a puddle. If you say, don't step in that puddle, I don't want you to get wet,
I'm
right?
Step in that puddle,
Right.
Mom.
Yeah. The kid will either want to do it out of defiance, and maybe that's when they feel like they need to. Or if the parent just says, well, what will happen if you step in a puddle? What happens? And the kid jumps in. They will have so much fun, and they'll experiment saying that, hey, I jumped in that puddle, made a huge mess, but I learned something that day. My feet are wet. I'm gonna be upset the whole day because my feet are wet. But you want that kid to experience and experiment around them, because that's when they can do it. And a lot of times parents will want to shield their kids from that. They want to say, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't touch this, you're gonna break it.
No, 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 you can't.
Yeah.
Don't do this, don't do that. All the time.
All the time, right? So, I remember going back to like when my daughter was really young, my wife wanted to buy a new couch, and I was like, I don't want to buy a new couch right now because this little one's growing up. She's gonna make a mess of it. Let's just ride.
You're
this
anticipating
couch out.
the mess already. I love that.
When she's a little bit older, we'll get a nice new couch, and she won't make a mess. But at least for the first 3 years, that thing's gonna go through hell. So if you get a new couch, you can be even more upset because she made a mess. Yeah. So let's not do that.
Yeah. You said the word experience right there, and he goes into it later on. It was a quote in here that has stuck with me, and it's what we forget is that for children, nearly every experience is a new experience.
Yes. So true.
And I think that's what we forget because we expect them to know.
Right.
So my daughter asked me yesterday, actually, she was eating her goldfish. She wanted to put milk in her goldfish and eat it like cereal. I was like, all right, go ahead, right? I know other parents who would be like, no, you're not allowed to do that. You're not supposed to do that, right? You're putting parameters on things because we know that you probably shouldn't do that. But children don't know that. So we let them experiment. And she had a couple of spoonfuls. At first, she's like, this is good. And then she's like, oh, no, this is not good. And then she dumped it. But she got to experience that. And now, like you said, she learned, she knows, and she's not going to keep asking because when you say no, it's going to be like lingering and haunting her as she lays at bed at night like, oh my gosh, why can't I have milk with my goldfish? Yes. What's going to happen? Yes. The other thing that he shares is that when children have childish behavior, if you provide love and support, they eventually will grow out of it. Because what's happening is you're fueling their emotional love tank, and they'll be able to have the strength to learn and figure out how to have the right behaviors eventually when they grow up. What happens is if you don't give them unconditional love, their love tank is depleted and they never actually grow out of that immature, childish behavior. And so that's probably why you walk around and you see these immature grown adults. You can probably guess that they're running around with a low love tank from when they were children, right? So the more you love them, despite their mistakes, their failures, the more able and capable they will grow up to be stronger, well-behaved, or I don't want to say the term well-behaved, but they know how to manage their emotions and their behaviors as adults. That's what your children need from you. Let's talk about the 5 love languages. Yes. Let's go into the first one. Physical touch.
So this one was what he mentioned is the easiest to do and also to use unconditionally. It's also one of the strongest ones because kids in their general nature they're very touchy around their environment. They want to touch new experiences, new things, and they also want to have that direct connection. That's why, when babies are born, they say that first few moments when the baby touches a mom's, the chest,
skin to skin, yes,
skin to skin, like that in itself creates a nice bond. Even with the dad afterwards too, like you create that bond. That's what makes the kids feel warm and close to you, right? So this was something, and I know I'm very, very physical, like in terms of like giving my daughter a lot of hugs. And I know she reciprocates that a lot because she's always like just random. She'll be doing her homework. Daddy, I want a hug. I'm like, okay, in the middle of homework, So it is the easiest one to do.
And it's he says it's the easiest and the most powerful.
It's more powerful
as well. It's very subtle, but there's a lot of love and emotions that you can transfer through just through touch. So the thing with touch is that we have to be cognizant of what touch looks like and feels like through the different ages. This is probably I think most of them it's very age oriented, but this one probably a lot more so. So with physical touch, you mentioned it, Tapas, with infants and babies, you're already having to hold them, change them, all of that. That actually suffices the amount of physical touch that they really need. And then when you get into the toddler stage, like young kids, the touch can become a little more playful, right? Things like tickle fights or piggyback rides, tousling their hair, things like that will suffice as you're reading bedtime stories to them at night. Have them sit in your lap, and just touch in general is really important. What I think it's pretty self-explanatory, physical touch. What I really appreciate here is he goes into the school age children part and pre-adolescence. And I think our children aren't there yet, but I think it's very important for us to know now as we get there, and for all of our viewers and listeners that have school age children, this I think is very important to understand. When boys, specifically in boys, when they're at from ages 7 to 9, they start to go through what Chapman calls the physical, it's like the touch resistance stage. They don't want the physical touch, the emotional physical touch. But just because they don't want the emotional physical touch, it doesn't mean they don't need to be physically touched. So the big misconception is they start to push away from their parents, and then their parents are like, okay, well, I guess my kids don't want me to hold them anymore, to hug them anymore, then I'll respect their boundaries. But that's not it. We have to realize how to shift our physical touch into a way that still provides touch and emotional support.
And the way that boys, you can express the physical touch with the boys as they're getting to that age is around like the wrestling part, right? So you roughhouse with them a little bit. Football, any kind of action sports where
contact sports,
like that's a way for them to get that physical touch with you.
Yes.
And that's one way you can do it. Because I know a lot of dads will just say, well, my boy doesn't want me to hug him because he's probably going to be embarrassed by me hugging him.
And that's fine.
Which is totally okay. But then there's also other ways around it too.
Then you start thinking about high fives, pat on the backs, simple, small gestures, but they still need to happen because you can't completely disconnect from that physical connection in that way.
So true.
And then when you go into the teens and the tweens, he talks very specifically about females. So for girls at this age, it's very important for them to have extra unconditional love from her father or from the strong male figures in her life. And this is more of a, hormonal thing where the daughters look to that male figure. And if that male in her life, let's just say dad for simplicity here, if her father is not there for her and giving her the physical touch, she in turn will be more likely to have sexual identity concerns. And the way that the author paints this is that she'll be more awkward around boys, very shy, but also could be very flirtatious, very seductive, and have kind of like an imbalanced relationship with the opposite sex. If touch is not your love language, right? If you yourself as a parent are very uncomfortable with touch, there are things that Chapman says that you can start doing for yourself to practice, because there really is no work around this. You can't not touch your child. You have to. And so he gives you tips to work on yourself first, like touching, your arm, stroking your arm, giving yourself massage, massaging your scalp, things like that, where you start to feel comfortable or even like the feeling of touch. And then you can slowly start to incorporate that over time with your child. Then at the end of this chapter, he does give a list of a couple of things that you can do to touch. And we touched on them also. Unintentional word pun there. Also, but are there any physical touches that you generally lean towards, Tapas, that you like, that's kind of like your go-to?
I mean, just for me, hugs. I'm a big hugger. So that's for me.
I like some of the things that he points out on here that we may not really think about. So things like giving high five or similar type of congratulation when there's something to celebrate. A lot of times parents will be like, oh, okay, great job. But maybe making it more intentional to do a high five every time, or like, if they're older, like just bumps, or like, whatever, fist bumps or whatever. And then purchase a gift for a child that's touch oriented. So that's a pillow or a blanket or sweater, because it's soothing to them as well. I think about little kids and toddlers that have like blankets, blankies, or like stuffed animals that they're very closely associated with. Indication here is that as they grow up, parents tend to take those away because they shouldn't have that emotional support anymore. But if you have a child that has an attachment to something physical, their love language is more than likely, physical touch, yes.
Yeah.
So don't take that away from them. They need to have that to soothe. And what you can do in the meantime is help fill that void with your own physical touch so that they feel okay letting go of it, because there's a void that they're trying to fill right now.
All right. So number 2 is our words of affirmation. So obviously words are very powerful, and it kind of does help. You want to use them for praise, encouragement, positive guidance. It really helps a kid build confidence, is what I've really noticed with it too. We do want to make sure that our kids are getting those positive energy, positive words from us at all times. Kind of going back to what Kobe Bryant's dad was saying as well too, right?
And he says in here, it's not just about words, right? It's your tone of how you say the words. It's what type of words you're saying and when you're saying them.
Yes.
So an example he says is, a lot of parents will say, "Oh, I tell my kids I love them all the time," but is there anything behind you saying it? And then also, does your child understand that you've said it, right? Because to a toddler, you saying "I love you," that's an abstract concept to them, right? Toddlers, they don't see love like they do their toy. They can't touch it, they can't feel it. So in their mind, they're really just guessing what love is.
Yep.
So how you say it, when you say it, are you saying it like casually as you're just walking by, "I love you, buddy"? Or are you saying as you're embracing them, holding them, reading a book to them, reading a story about something that they love and they're feeling that lovey feeling, and then you say it, then they're able to connect and understand what love really means. So being really conscious of words and when you're saying them, how you're saying it.
Yeah, because I mean, how many times have your kids have said, "Oh, I love you, mom," or "I love you, dad," and then you just go, "Oh, love you too." Like that sort of "love you
I've
too."
seen it. Yep.
Like it's just one of those things where the kid will feel like you're not excited to do it. You're just saying it for the sake of doing it. And kids are very smart.
Yes.
They'll catch on that you're just saying it just to say it, and there's no actual meaning behind it sometimes. And again, I'm not saying parents are saying it just without meaning, but I'm just saying that that's what they're perceiving as the energy that's coming out of it.
So words of affirmation, there's a couple of things to it too. You said it earlier, the words praise.
Praise.
So want to clarify a couple of things. So affection and love actually means expressing appreciating the child for who they are, right? It's just their natural being. Praise is appreciating a child for what they can do, what they're attempting to do. It's something that they have control over. So then he says it's very important that when we're giving words of affirmation, it's words of affirmation for what they're doing, because they have control over it, and then they can kind of appreciate that a little bit more. He says there's a fine line between giving too much of that as well, because you don't want to come off as flattery, because kids are really smart. Like if it just becomes automatic for you to say, it's going to become meaningless, and then for them they'll feel like, okay, my parents just lying, or they don't care anymore.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed, example of praise could be like, "Hey, awesome job getting straight A's on your report card," right? Like that's they did something and it's very tangible, and then that's what praise is. But if you just say, "Hey, I can tell you love school and you're really good at school because you're enjoying it," like that in itself is the affection. That's where the other part of it comes, because it's who they are. They're somebody who loves school, they love to study.
Yes.
Versus just saying, "Awesome job getting straight A's."
Yes.
So like that's the big difference between the two. And you want to try to avoid always just going towards like,
the
hey,
praise,
praising side only.
Yeah. The other type of words of affirmation is encouragement.
For most child, everything is new. Right, so you want to encourage them to experiment around the environment, like we talked about earlier, right? You want them to feel like they have control over what's happening around them, and also you want to make sure that if there is any positive things that they got out of it, you want to encourage that out of them. But also, if there's any negative feeling they have about it, you also want to encourage it out of them too. And say, hey, like
you talk through the concerns more than the actual issue that you don't like.
Yeah. I was listening to a dad podcast a couple of weekends ago, and I use this every single day now. I love that they mentioned it, is that they said, when they pick up their daughter, the first question they ask, first they ask, "How was your day? What did you do today? Great job." One of the questions that they ask is, "Do you have any questions about today?"
Oh.
Right? I love that question, because then the kid can go,
I like that.
Yeah, and so my daughter was like, "Yeah, Dad, like and I was doing this, and then my teacher took this away from me. I don't know why." And so I said, "Okay, well, what were you doing before?" Kind of walk her through the whole situation that was happening. But I like that open-ended question, because there are things that the child might just go, "What was that about?"
Yeah.
And then, but then now you can be something.
I love that, because children sometimes I feel like they're a little more scared to ask questions. If you don't make it a kind of like an expectation or something that they should be doing, then they tend not to do it.
Yeah. So I like that because it also kind of encourages them to, again, negative feeling, negative things that may have happened, any concerns that they had, or even positive feelings will come out to you.
I started asking George, so like, how's your day? And then what was the best thing that happened today? What did you love the most? But then I started asking him now. I used to say like, did anything bad happen? Or, and he's like, no, whatever. So now I ask him, tell me one thing that made you sad today or one thing that didn't feel good today. And then he starts thinking through it. And sometimes he'll just come up with something that's like probably it just came and went for him, like, oh, someone took my pencil or something like that. But in that moment, it did make him feel enough that he brought it up later on.
Right.
And then we talked through like, and I like doing that because I want him to realize that, hey, every day we could have something that may not be too great, but we talk through it and we figure it out, and that it's normal to have those feelings. The one thing in here he does talk about is if your child's love language is words of affirmation, then you have to be very careful to know that the opposite of it, if you respond or you say anything in anger or hostility, can actually break down your child much more so. Like it's devastating to them if you say something mean or harsh, and even if you just say it one time.
How can parents do things that can give the kid words of affirmation?
Okay. I like this one because I'm big on words of affirmation. Yes. So I actually have done, when I was reading through these, I have done quite a few of them. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Hopefully this is one of George's major, but like you said earlier, I feel like George is like everything, all of them. But the first thing that Chapman wrote in here is put a Post-it note in their lunchbox with some encouraging words. And I do that every day with George's lunchbox, and it's really cute because he saves them. And he comes home and he puts them on his wall. And so he has a wall of all these Post-its that I've made for him. And so now I'm trying to like make it a little more intricate. Like every day it's like drawing like a superhero, or like it's hard coming up with new things every day. But it's totally worth it. It's so cute. If you're artistic, create a painting or drawing that shows how much you love your child. So it doesn't necessarily have to be words, but it's saying something in a way that they understand it. So this works really great for actually all ages, right? If anyone appreciates arts and pictures, like they see it as, they hear it as I love you. Create a special name of affection for your child. So just like a nickname just between the two of you guys. Maybe there's create an encouragement jar that you guys can drop notes in and praise and read together on a regular basis. And really important here, it says when a child makes a mistake, try doing something helpful. First, use words of recognition that you knew of their good intentions first, and then we can help them through the mistake. But at no point are we trying to reprimand or make them feel bad about their mistake. I went out of town one day or one night, and the kids were already in bed, so I stayed up late to draw these little Post-its of them. I was figuring out how to draw like Spider-Man. And my husband comes on. He's like, what are you doing? It's like midnight. You're like sitting here like drawing on a Post-it. Like, I just want them to see it because when I leave in the morning, they won't see me. But apparently when they saw it, like Gemma was so excited, and she had accidentally crumpled it, and she was so upset that it happened. So honestly, it takes time for us, but to them, it just means the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to third, quality time.
So pretty much just making sure you're giving your attention to your children, and also just being present with them, right? So it's one thing to be around them, and another thing to be actually present. Or one thing that I learned is one thing to be playing with them in their playtime, because you're just sitting there, you might be doing tea time with your daughter or whatever, versus actively engaging in that moment with them, because that's the quality time that they really want.
Yeah. So. He says to use quality time as a time to learn something about your child. Yes. And I thought that was a good spin on it, because I don't think I naturally go to that, because I kind of play sometimes absent-mindedly because I'm thinking about something else, or I'll be like on my phone, do something, and then playing and going back and forth. But he says you need to give your child undivided attention and use this time to learn something about them. And like you said, engage with them. Yeah. And quality time doesn't mean you have to go somewhere. Right. It doesn't mean you have to do something elaborate. It means you get down to their level. Where you're going is to their emotional support level that you go to together.
Yeah, one thing that I've gone out of quality time is that they stop asking for monetary gifts and stuff like that, because my daughter was so used to me just being out, and then when I would show up, I would have a gift for her. That was my way of making up for her, right? Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier. But as I started to spend more quality time with her, be more intentional with my time with her, I just saw her ask for less stuff, and just more like Dad, can you play with me? Can we do this together? Can we do
Yeah.
this? You know, she went to gymnastics for the first time yesterday, and she was so excited to do it, but she didn't know she didn't know what was going on.
Oh.
But we came home, and I said, hey, you know, like how did you feel about it? She's like, I felt great, but Dad, can you help me with this? I want to learn cartwheels. So like we were practicing, I'm holding
Oh,
her
I
and all that kind
love
of stuff.
that.
But that's what they really want, right?
Yes.
They want you to
They don't
just
want
be
a
present.
toy.
Yeah, they don't want a toy, or they don't want to just watch videos. They actually want you to spend time with them.
Quality time creates an environment in which the parents and child can talk about more important issues. We talk about sharing feelings, sharing thoughts. Actually, just started this. It's probably been maybe a month now. I wake up early, and because George is on a different schedule than Gemma, my husband takes him to school every day, and then I take Gemma to school because we go in opposite directions. But because I wasn't having that time in the morning with him anymore, I started to take him on quick 5-minute walks every morning. So every morning now before he leaves, he and I will go out together, we'll walk, and we'll just use that time as our quality time. And we talk about our feelings. And this morning it was fun because I said, okay, close your eyes and take a deep breath. Tell me what you smell. Or close your eyes and then tell me what you hear. And it was just like our feelings and our senses. And he's just funny. He said the first thing he smelled was bird poop, but you know, like it creates that emotional connection that we had never had before.
Yes,
and so now every morning I ask him, I was like, do you want to go on our walk? He's like, yeah. It's so fun. I highlighted this quote in here I really liked. He says, don't be a victim of the urgent. In the long run, much of what seems so pressing right now won't even matter. What you do with your children will matter forever.
So true.
And I think we all need that reminder to slow down, because in our own lives, in our own work, and everything that we're doing, we feel like it's so important. And half of the time it is, but the other half of the time, the reality of it is that it's not important, but we make it important because it makes us feel important. It makes us feel validated that what we're doing is justified. And we have to let go of that ego part and let go and say it's not important. What's really important is my child, because we're never going to have this time back. Once they're grown up, you can't fix and undo what you didn't do to begin with.
Right, especially when they're so young. You know, you're gonna miss all the fun times when they were 4 years old, 5 years old, whatever it is, right? Like you're gonna miss all that, and then you're eventually gonna get to a point where they don't want that physical touch from you, and they don't want that quality time with you. You're gonna be like, oh, I miss all that, and I guess my daughter hates me, or my son hates me.
Resentment brews, blame, all of
Take
that.
advantage, but while you have that moment when they're so young, you want to hold on to it.
He also says, you schedule other people into your calendars. Why not your children?
Yeah.
And it's so true. We make time for everything else, but do we really make time for our kids? Right. And it might feel a little formal scheduling your children into your calendar, but it's not. You're making the time for them. And for anyone who works and you know, uses scheduling apps, Outlook, things like that, block out family time, block out time just for your children. And if you have multiple children, schedule times with each of them individually so that you have that one-on-one as well. Examples of quality time, we kind of talked through a lot of that, but he also talks about everything that you do on the daily can also be considered quality time as well. Errands that you run, chores that you do, folding your laundry can also be quality time that you spend with them. And it might take, he says it's going to take longer, right? And I think that's why a lot of parents don't tend to take that time, because it would take longer to teach your child how to fold clothes and to actually do it yourself and put it away.
Yeah, and kids naturally want to be helpful. They want to help you out, whatever they, because they want to just be involved in your life. They want to be with you at all times. So like my daughter will always ask me to fold clothes with her, or if I'm going to go get the mail from the mailbox, Dad, can I come with you? Like it's just that little time, right, that she wants to be with me. And one of the things on there says, you know, even turning off your TV show and watching their show.
I was just going to say that.
Like I can't tell you how many times I've watched Frozen and Encanto. I memorized every single song literally from front to back. Like, but that's what it would take.
You are a great parent. I was going to say the complete opposite. I can't tell you how many times I've sat there and not fully paid attention, or I'm on my phone, or I'm reading a book, or I'm doing something because I assume in my mind just being next to him is good enough. But I'm much more conscious now just to sit there and actually pay attention with him, because I know that I have done that in the past, not the right way, because I remember he'll be like, Mommy, watch, Mommy, look at this. Oh my gosh, Mommy, look. And I'm like, Right. But if he's had to ask me so many times, obviously I'm not, right? So I got to do better with that. And then we go to number 4, gifts.
Yes. This one.
I turn this to you because I know we've gone on business trips together, and then we'll like go shopping or something, or even just at the airport, Tapas walks up with like shopping bags full of crap. I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh, I think that was the whole. I mean, for me, I
Well,
was
because we were traveling so much,
traveling
right?
so
We were
much,
never home.
and that was my way of. That was the guilt, my
Yeah.
guilt coming out, saying that I missed that time with my daughter, so I'm gonna bring her a toy from wherever I went, so she can feel like as a part
Sorry,
that
I'm
as
not trying to
well.
gift shame you over here.
Oh no, I still remember. I think we were at downtown Disney. You're like Tapas, two toys only. All right, I had like five, and she's like, pick two, and I was like, I feel like a kid. I'm like, why don't these five? I only pick two. What? Like I was so like lost with it.
Meanwhile, I'm like, I'm gonna give this ticket stub to George. We're at Disneyland without them. Have
Yeah,
fun with my ticket.
yeah. But yes, I am very guilty of the gifts, but I think what he argues in here is that it's a different kind of gifts that he's talking about.
Yes. So gifts are good,
Yes.
actually, right? But he does specify a true gift is not payment for services rendered.
Yep.
Rather, it's an expression of love for the individual and is given freely by the donor.
Right.
So you're not trying to make up for something.
Right.
You're not trying to suppress a guilt that you have, and you're not trying to buy your child into doing something like
Right.
do your homework and you'll get this,
Yes.
clean your room and we'll get ice cream.
Right.
Okay, so what is good gift giving?
So, like carrying small snacks or, candies to give out as treats when you're away from home, like just stuff like that, making their favorite meals. Like they love chicken nuggets. Okay, like I'll make it for you at home, or
Yeah.
we'll make it together.
Yeah.
Like that kind of, that's an act of giving a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how he says in here, try to teach your child to recognize gifts in a non-traditional form, right? So children typically think that gifts are presents that you buy for them, right? So he says, why don't you, when you buy them clothes that you normally would, wrap the clothes that you would give to them, and have them understand things like just he said, a meal that you cook for them is also a gift, so that they can start to appreciate things that aren't wrapped up in shiny bows all the time or has to be bought. So they realize that eventually they see everything in life as a gift, and that it's circulated, and that you can in turn give your own gift to other people as well.
Yeah, and it could just be as simple as, again, for my daughter, she loves to play Roblox. So one time I actually had her record her playing, and then I recorded her gameplay, and I made a little video.
Oh my gosh, I
like how
love
they do on
that.
YouTube Kids, right?
Yeah.
They have all these kids playing Roblox, and it's a little face cam. And I made a video just for her and saying, "Hey, here you go. Here's you playing like how those kids do." And she was so excited.
Oh
and
my
it didn't take
gosh.
anything out of it, but that was a nice, gift
Yeah.
that she will always remember.
Yeah. So he says in here, a gift is something that is perceived as a symbol of love
Right.
and is long lasting, right? So you can also buy gifts. It's not to say you can't buy gifts,
Right.
but say you buy a gift from a vacation, though, right? Because that's it's monumental of the time and the trip that you
Yeah.
spent together, and they can look at it and it's a long lasting feeling. So it's a gift that has meaning behind it versus just a learning toy or something at the
Bribe or something
store.
like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Last one is acts of service. What do you think about this one?
So this is I like this because it's kind of like the leadership books that we've read that are more our favorites are the ones that talk about your own personal growth and then how you turn around and give it back to the world, right? Because it doesn't work if you just change you or improve on yourself. You also have to help improve those around you as well. And I think that's what this chapter for me represents. It's acts of service. How do you help your children see that everything that we do, because the number one as a parent, number one act of service is actually being that parent, right? Taking care of your child and doing everything that you can for them and helping them see that so that they can in turn do the same for other people. And so he talks about the acts of service in this book. Specifically, what we're doing is understanding the 5 love languages of our children and having our children see that we try to speak all of their languages, even though it's not something that we understand or that is necessarily our strength. But by showing that we speak their language, they in turn will feel that it's important to be selfless and do the same for others.
Yes.
And to be understood. That's a normal relationship that you should have.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the core, things that a child needs to have in order to be very successful in a social environment, right? You want them to feel comfortable, also giving acts of service as well to the people around them too.
Yeah.
So the earlier you do it, the more you show it to your kids.
Yeah.
The more comfortable they'll feel doing it to everyone else around them, even at school.
And it's all about teaching by example,
Yes.
leading by example. This is like that worldly love language that I think maybe you may not necessarily see it or recognize it as often, because he even talks about like, hey, walking the dog is a type of act of service. It's just doing something for someone else. And I think it's a little bit harder to recognize versus the other four. But there are examples that he gives here. Overall, it's the message and theme of helping another person. And the example that he gives in this one really resonated with me, because he talks about this father and his sons, and this father is a very tough love type of man, and if it's something that his sons can't do, he won't help them. He'll just say, well, you can do it, I know you can do it, just try it yourself. And come to find out, one of his sons tells him like, hey, I know you love me, but sometimes I feel like you don't, because you never help me. And it's not that they should know how to do it themselves. It's, if you can help, you should help.
Right.
And teaching your child that is going to teach them to go into the world and do the same, because otherwise you're going to teach them tit for tat, essentially. Like, I'm only going to help someone if I get something in return, or it's not my responsibility to help because they can do it themselves.
And this love language is so important. Like, as they get older, when they have, they get married or they have relationships, or even at work, like this is so like essential for it too.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I think a lot of times, if even though we know like people around us can do things by themselves if we really told them to, but then just the fact that you even went out of your way to do it for them, that tells them like, hey, like my mom and dad really love me, because they want to spend extra time. I mean, one thing that I do with my daughter is, we always donate toys, and I did that once, and she was a wreck, because she was like, oh my God, you're giving all my toys away. But now, once I kind of explained to her, like, there are other kids out there who would love to have these toys. You don't play with them as much. I know you enjoyed your time with them, but you no longer play with them as much. So why don't we give them out? So now what she does is like once a month, she'll just like grab a bunch of toys, and she'll just like sit there and like, and she's like, Dad, I want to donate these. I'm like, okay. I'm like, are you sure you want that one? I just bought that. I literally bought her a toy on Saturday, and then on Tuesday she's like, Dad, I'm like, all right, if you want to give it to us, it's totally cool with me.
I love that, because it reminds me of the attachment and detachment that we've been talking about.
Yep.
Jay said, you think like a monk. It's just, as soon as you can let go of the fact that you don't own anything, it feels so much better, because now you can reshift your focus to what's really important.
Right.
And it's the values, it's the characters, it's everything else, the non-tangible things in life. It's so funny, because I think about that too, because same with George now, I'd be like, okay, because now we do kind of like, if he wants a toy, I'd be like, okay, if we buy a toy, then you need to donate 5 toys, right? Yep. So then, okay, what 5 do you want? And then we'll replace this, because my goal is eventually to have like minimal toys, right? Exactly. But now he'll go and, just like you say, or he'll pick like the most expensive toy to donate. I'm like, are you kidding me? That was $50. But then it's teaching me to also let go as well.
Exactly. So that's the 5 love languages. So now the most important question for parents is, how do we identify these?
How do we know?
Yeah, how do you know what's your child's love language? So what's the roadmap?
So here's the thing. If your child is 5 and younger, their primary love language is all 5 of them. Don't even try. Speak all 5 every opportunity that you get, because not only is it because they're too young to really like understand and have fully developed to what they really want yet, they're young in the point that they also are testing you as well. They don't really know what they want. They're just trying to go through everything. So if you have a child under 5, you will see every day, you're like, oh yeah, it's definitely words of affirmation. Or like George is always like, Mommy, do you like this? Did you like that? Did you like what I drew for you? And so one day I'm like, yes, totally words of affirmation. And then the next day he's like, can I have this? I want to buy this. I love this. I want this. I want that. And so it's like, you just don't really know what it is every day. So under 5, all of them. That's your shortcut right there. You don't even need to try. Okay. But once they're a little bit older, after 5, between 5 to 10, this is probably the best way to do it. Number 1 is to observe how your child expresses love to you, because children will speak the language that they desire the most. So observe your child. So if they're saying things like, hey, Mommy, you're pretty. Daddy, thank you for helping me with my homework. Or I love you, Mommy. Have a good day, Daddy. You know that's like words of affirmation. Right. So you just kind of pay attention to what they do the most. Number 2 is observe how your child expresses love to other people. And so if your child wants to take a present or gift to their teacher at school, then their love language is probably gifts as well. This is different than adults, because again, like adults, we know what we want and we know what we like. It's different. Children, they only know that one language that they're very familiar with. So they tend to stick with that.
Yeah.
And then number 3 is listen to what your child requests most often. So if your child is saying, look what I'm doing, let's go play outside or let's sit and read a book, then they're requesting quality time.
Right.
Again, George does that to me all the time too. So I'm just like, I don't know what my child's all of them.
Right. Number 4 is notice what your child most frequently complains about. So if they're always saying, Mom, Dad, you're always so busy, or why'd you take care of the new baby, all that kind of stuff, you can see that that's quality time that they're asking for.
And keep in mind, every child complains.
Yes.
They're always going to complain, but you have to listen to what they're really complaining about all of the time. And then number 5 is give your child a choice between 2 options. My son is such a little smartass. The other day in the bathtub, I asked him. So essentially this is, you ask them a question if they would like something out of the gifts bucket or the quality time bucket, right? So I asked my son, hey, would you like to go rock climbing with mommy, or do you want to go pick out a new toy today after school? And he's like,
both.
I want both. Can we go get a toy and then go rock climbing? And it's just like, I love how your mind thinks. Yes. Yeah. Don't accept those black and white answers.
Why is that an option?
Right?
Just
Exactly.
say
always
yes.
both. Always more.
Always
Always
both.
everything. Yeah. So giving them options, and then he recommends you keep a journal and you just kind of go through and you alternate between the 5 love languages until you can deduce exactly which one.
Last one is after all that fails, what do they have to do?
The 15-week strategy.
I was like, what? 15 weeks.
Good thing is it's a simple 15-week strategy, right? So what Chapman says is for 15 weeks, what you're going to do is 2 weeks, you're going to focus on one love language. So for 2 weeks, you're going to do all physical touch, everything physical. And then you take a week off. And during that week, you kind of scale back.
Yep.
He actually gives go back to 1/3 of what you did before. So don't just cold turkey, touch him for 2 weeks and then no physical contact at all.
Yeah.
Scale back, keep a journal, and just note their behaviors, how they act, how they respond. And then after that 1 week, you go to the next one, do it for 2 weeks, take a week off. And then at the end of the 15 weeks, you'll be able to tell when your child best responded to you. And then you'll know that that is their primary love language.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it is, what a lot of parents will consider as time investment. But when you consider that you're shaping up them for the rest of their lives, 15 weeks means nothing.
I think
really.
also if you are a parent of a 2-unit parent, I think it would be something fun, right? So as parents, you can sit down with each other and you can say, hey, this week we're going to do physical touch. And you make it kind of a game with the parents. And at the end of the day, you also have something to talk about with your spouse or your partner as well. It gives you something to do together as a family. What Chapman says in the book is you cannot let your child know that you're conducting this experience, because especially if they're older, like teenagers, they catch on, then they'll be able to manipulate with you and kind of mess with your mind.
You don't want to be like, all right, for next week, I'm going to give you a lot of hugs. And you're like, okay.
And I will record how you respond to me. But you do it on the down low and then you observe. But I think it'd be really cool to kind of do that as an experiment.
Especially for parents who read the book. I think as you guys are seeing a lot of the examples, you will have a lot of good ways to kind of bring that out of the kid too. He has a lot of good examples in there to say okay, how can you express this love? Yeah. Because a lot of times parents will say, okay, acts of service, what do I do? But he has examples on there for you to do it. So it's not as difficult as it may seem.
And I like that within each language, it's pretty broad, right? Yeah. Words of affirmation is not just words that you speak. They're things that you can do, artistic expressions, just like a lot of activities, and it makes it full of life, essentially. So overall, what did you think of the book?
I like the book a lot. I got a lot of good takeaways, and I think my intention was to also learn a lot about my daughter and
do you feel like you learned?
I did, yes. Yeah, because, I was the parent that said, my daughter does all 5 of them, but I can see which one she's really relying on in terms of receiving and giving out. Yeah. And so now that I can see it, and I've used examples from the book, I can say, okay, that's how I can connect with her more, because now I'm trying to see that part of her come out, especially as she's getting older too. Yeah.
I really liked the content of this book. I'm going to be honest. The book was a little bit harder for me to read. And I read 5 Love Languages probably 11 years ago. And I actually really liked this book. I don't know if I have changed or my mind has changed, but what I did not really like about this book is that it's very religious heavy, right? Yeah. Not to say anything about religions, but I wasn't expecting it. And so when I came in, it was very openly godly, Jesus, things like that. So if that's not your flavor, this might be a little off-putting for you to read. However, I did read a lot of the reviews online, and a lot of people have said like, hey, I don't follow any type of religious beliefs, and I thought this book was great as well. So I'm just sharing personally for me, I thought it was a little more heavy on the religious side, and that was hard. That's what made me not necessarily want to read through the book.
Yeah, I agree with you that because that was the same thing with me too. I'm not the most religious person either, and so what I would do is when I see that coming in the paragraph, I would just skip to the next paragraph, and that was me just being very blunt with it.
Yeah.
Because again, the context and the content of the book are really really good and very valuable.
Yes,
But and
agreed.
again, he's a Christian pastor, so I'm sure he was gonna put that in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just kind of skipped through it, and you still will get a lot of good takeaways from the book.
However, if you are very religious, then you will absolutely love this book even more so. So I think that is good on that side. I do tend to feel like it was a little preachy in some parts, and then there were some words that didn't that sit well with me. There are a lot of things where he said you need to train your child, this is how you train your child, and I think it's the word train is a little controlling and ownership to me, and so I didn't necessarily like that part.
It's counterintuitive to what he kind of says throughout the book, right? So you have to understand kids are that way, they're going to be doing things and they're learning as they go, so you can't say train them to do anything. So I kind of like with Adam Grant, like you're gonna preach something the whole book, and then at the end, kind of just say no, don't do that. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. So just those two things kind of threw me off. So if you choose to pick up the book and read it, those are things that I would say prepare your mind for. But otherwise, the content itself is really great. At the end of each of those chapters, like Tapa said, there's a full list of things and examples that you can do. And so essentially, if you don't even want to read the book, just go to the back of each chapter and you'll get all of those examples.
Or even more, just watch our summary.
That's right. We made a whole summary just for you guys with all of the examples.
There you go.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for spending your time with us and drinking honest apple juice boxes with us. Hopefully you guys open up your boxes this way and never have any unfortunate spills in the future. Pinkies up. Thank you. And like Tapa said, if you get a chance, check out our summary that we've created. We kind of made a fun kid spin to it. We hope you appreciate it. If you like it, click that like button down there, subscribe to us, let us know what we can do for you. And we're always taking book summaries. So love to hear from you guys. Thanks for joining us today. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.